Hi guys, welcome to the Citizen channel. I hope you're all staying safe and well. Please, if you are new to this channel, please push that subscribe button. We do everything City, past and present here on these little vlogs, so I do try and inform and entertain, and there's some links on screen as well for Facebook and Twitter where I do post loads of City stuff. So if you follow a friend me on there, I do check every few days and follow and friend everyone back. And if you do get a chance, please have a check out my film and TV channel as well, which I try and inform and entertain on there, and all the latest films and TV drama here in the UK and from around the world. So if you can check that out, that will be fantastic. Anyway, hope you enjoy today's feature. Right, thanks for joining me for our continuing look at Manchester City history from 1880, and we've got up to 1970-71 now. This is a two-parter, this is part two, so if you've not watched the first part, get back and watch it and you can find out what happened up to about November, December time we've took so far, obviously in the City's 70-71 season. Yeah, away from football, if you were going to the cinema, we were watching things like Love Story, there you are, one for the ladies there to drag your men to, and Airport, a bit more actiony that one. That was good stuff. The Christmas number one for 1970 was Dave Edmunds with I Hear You Knocking, and obviously But You Can't Come In, etc, etc. I even sort of sing it in my head then when I saw, so I do remember that just a little bit. Harold Wilson was in charge of the third Labour government on the trot at that stage, and yeah, as a 11 year old lad, yeah, the first page 3 girls had appeared in the Sun. Very healthy as far. There you go. I won't deny it wasn't for a young man like me to see it, to sort of have a look on the top shelf of the paper shop and get the Sundown, have a quick look at page 3. And my dad told me, well, my dad wasn't alive unfortunately then, but if my elder brothers hadn't been buying it or whatever. But yeah, there you go. Page 3 in the Sun was introduced. And by the end of the year, Mr. Paul McCartney had wound up. He'd filed a lawsuit to wind up the Beatles group, so that finished them off as far as actually touring and doing stuff together is concerned. And the pound, yeah, the pound in your pocket then would be worth about £13.57 now. So there you go. What a time to be alive! Absolutely brilliant, as I say, a 10, 11-year-old lad. And City weren't bad, were we? We were pretty good at the time as well, so that's even better. So obviously back to City. We'd booked a Cup Winners' Cup quarter-final, of course, against Gornick, who obviously we'd beat the previous season. We'd done that, but unfortunately, away from the Cup Winners' Cup, things hadn't been going that well. We'd stuttered along in the league a little bit after a fantastic start. I mean, we lay second after 8 games, and we're actually a point behind leaders' leads at the time, and we had a game in hand, so in theory, if we'd won the game in hand, we would have been top of the league at that stage, but we'd start to stutter a bit. We'd been knocked out of the League Cup, embarrassed by Carlisle United. We'd also lost in our little jaunt into the Anglo-Italian League at the first hurdle as well. So not fantastic. The FA Cup hadn't started yet, but that wasn't going to be very good either, unfortunately. But there you go. But yeah, it wasn't just on the pitch. City was stuttering. A lot of these problems started to arise because there was a bit of friction between our wonderful management partnership, Allison and Mercer, at the time, of course. And obviously this passed over as that Malcolm Allison had an ally on the board, of course, Ian Niven was the main guy who stuck up for Allison. They obviously had the little Joe Mercer had his supporters and Allison had his supporters on the board, so it's quite split, to be honest with you. But yeah, Allison had asked Ian Niven, been tasked with finding a man with £100,000. Obviously, that's if you look at that, how much your pound's worth, that's about 1,357,000 to launch a takeover. You won't get much of City for 1,357,000 now, would you? But there you go. That was what was 100k in those days would get you now. But it's amazing how these things change, isn't it? So he'd obviously asked Ian Niven to find a guy, and he found a double glazing tycoon at the time. Obviously quite a new thing at that time, double glazing, from Oldham, called Joe Smith. There you go, a good old fashioned name. But, as I said, there was obviously two sides to the boardroom. Chairman Alexander himself was in no mood to stand aside or accept this fight for a takeover. He was certainly not going to let it happen without a fight. Alexander and his son had almost 600 of their 2,000 shares then in City. There was 2,000 shares in the club, so they had about 600 between them. Newman Smith, though, this new guy Smith, was confident of acquiring about 800 shares and then formed an alliance to give him a needed majority on the board. I mean, the media loved it. The media ate it up. I mean, as England's most recently successful club was in the midst of a boardroom battle, and much to the fans' bemusement, to be honest with you, at the time, the papers happily reported the sordid off-pitch goings on. It's a bit much for the fans to understand why all this was carrying on. Smith himself used the media very, very well, and came over as a loyal City fan. And he came out with these sound bites that obviously were bound to endear him to the City fans. He will make City the greatest club in the world, and assured them that in Alisson they had one of the greatest men in football. So I mean, all the sort of things as fans you want to hear. I mean, the dream, of course, of men like Alisson and Smith, who obviously banged his drum, was to have City emulate United's success, of course, in Europe and their standing in world football. But they forgot one thing. They forgot, or chose to forget, or to neglect one thing. United, yes, had become a monster. In that terms, their support had increased incredibly due to their rise over the previous 10 years to the 1970-71. You take from the Munich air disaster to becoming champions of Europe. They'd grown enormously through that stage. It was doable, of course it was doable, but it would take time and some clever management and patience to actually get anywhere near United's standing. But sadly for City, patience then, as it has been obviously many years since then at times, has been in very short supply amongst the men that matter, the money men, if you like, the men in the suits, etc. More or less the patience is more the fans now, isn't it? But at the time, obviously, it's the men in suits that wanted City to be more than what they were, and especially that was an Alisson-led thing, who thought, obviously, as we said in part one, thought the board were a little bit penny pinching and thinking too small all the time. There's no doubt that given the time, there's no doubt. Sorry, I lost that. There's no doubt that given the time, City could have achieved much more. Although we dropped behind United as far as support and world standing, City were definitely still in the same bracket as the other big English clubs, like Leeds and Liverpool. So it wasn't as though we dropped dramatically. And as I said, we've been winning these cups. We've become a bit of a glamour club ourselves. But the eagerness and restlessness at board level would actually cost City dearly, as they wanted it all, as I said, sooner rather than later. As the media stoked the fires, it all became a little bit messy, and not unexpectedly it affected the atmosphere at the club, both off and more importantly on the pitch. Senior players in the main were loyal to Mercer. We're not happy with Alisson's involvement at all these goings on at boardroom level, and it led to the players, amongst them obviously the trio, the wonderful trio Bell, and Summerby, having a confrontation with Alisson, where they let their feelings be known, and the altercation itself took place before an away game at Leeds, a 1-0 loss at the end of November 1970. Obviously, the Mercer who backed Alexander relationship with Alisson had continued to deteriorate further, and after the loss to Leeds, Alexander, and he still had the majority of the board behind him, reacted by telling Alisson that he'd been sacked. He was actually sacked after this Leeds defeat. But surprisingly, despite the bad blood between them, it was Joe Mercer who actually supported Alisson in this, and told the board in no uncertain terms that if Alisson went, then so did he. So the board actually backed down. And of course, Malcolm Alisson stayed. But it did affect City. They slowly slipped down the league, despite a 4-1 hammering of our old enemy United in early December 1970. That was from a Lee hat-trick and a Doyle goal. Thrashed United 4-1 at that stage. This is a game where Glimpardo was obviously had his leg broken as well by George Best. There was no animosity from Glimpardo to that, but not so much the fans weren't as forgiving as that, but there you go. So this was that game where obviously Best broke Pardo's leg. Obviously Arthur Mann and Tony Towers would stand in for the left back duties, but this was just another blow for City. We had been stuttering along a little bit, and even despite that 4-1 hammer of United, it hadn't propelled us up the league too much. And obviously we had Arthur Mann and Tony Towers standing in as left back, but it was a blow to City on the pitch. There would be further blows to City on the pitch as the season went on. as injuries kept happening to key players just at the wrong time for City. So after that victory, we sat 6. Yeah, City sat 6 after that derby victory, but we were 11 points behind leaders Leeds again at that stage. Don't forget, we had the, after 8 games, we could have been above them if we won our game in hand. So, but with 2 points for a win, even 11 points was quite a lot of points to sort of try and catch up. As I said, we played in the FA Cup. Unfortunately, we got to round 5 and a 2-1 loss at home to Arsenal knocked us out of that. So realistically, by that time, with the league still seemingly unreachable, if you like, realistically, the Cup Winners' Cup became the only trophy and escape for City that season as far as winning a trophy was concerned. So it was off to Gornik, wasn't it? It was off to Poland on the 10th of March 1971 in front of an estimated, yes, this obviously the crowds are estimated anywhere between 100,000 and 110,000. I'll say about, because obviously they'd had 110,000 in the Gornik ground, but they estimate about 105,000 at that game. We were deservedly, obviously, put under pressure from the fans and put under pressure by Gornik because they deservedly beat us 2-0 in that game. To gain a little bit of revenge, of course, for the Cup Winners' Cup final win we had over them this previous season. But 2 weeks later, a slightly less crowded Main Road. There was a crowd of just under 32,000 for that one. I was there that night. City mirrored that scoreline, and we actually won 2-0 as well. But with no penalties in those days, and obviously there was no need for an away goal rule in this. Obviously it was 2-2, wasn't it? 2-0 there, 2-0 at ours. So yeah, it was off to Copenhagen for a replay. I'm not too sure how many City fans made it over there, but to reach a semi-final against Chelsea, they would have had to beat Gornik on a neutral ground. But all's well that ends well. The City side, which is not looking as similar to what we had seen previously to the great City Cup teams of the past 2 or 3 years. 1-3-1 from goals from Bell, Connor and Jeffries. Yeah, the City team that night had 4 or 5 newish names that weren't overly familiar to people outside who hadn't been going week in, week out. I mean, Ron Healy was in goal. Dave Connor was in at full-back. Tony Towers at full-back. Doyle Booth, Donachie, Derek Jeffries, Colin Bell, Francis Lee, Neil Young, and Hill. It's Andy Hill on the wing as well. So say 4 or 5 sort of names that weren't there while we were at the league and cup wins over the past 2 or 3 seasons. But by April the 10th, yeah, City sat 8th in the league. So not a disaster, but we're a massive, at that stage, 19 points now behind Leeds. So with this knowledge, it was off to Stamford Bridge on the 14th of April for the first leg of the Cup Winners' Cup semi-final. We'd already beaten Chelsea at the Bridge at the end of January, but the injury list since then certainly hadn't improved, and we were picking up injuries all over the place. Bell and Doyle had joined the injured list, and to actually come away from London with just a 1-0 defeat was quite an accomplishment, many thought, on the night. And I say it was a very unusual at the time defensive performance from City, but obviously under the circumstances that's all we could probably manage. I mean, the team that night, for instance, at Stamford Bridge was Corrigan, Buck, Connor, Towers, Booth, Donachie, Johnson, another new name, Hill, Lee, Young and Mann. Of course, for the second leg, Corrigan and Booth actually were now injured as well. So obviously we had a couple of players coming back, but obviously now we'd lost Corrigan. Obviously, Mr. Healy was going to actually stand in. He would have a big impact on the second game. So there's almost a 44,000 crowd at Main Road that night. And I don't think, I mean, I remember the time. I mean, I do sort of remember this thing, and I was pretty disappointed. Obviously, I do remember the Cup Winners' Cup very well, the win before, and this season after. I do remember this Chelsea game. There wasn't a lot of optimism. We were struggling because of the injuries. We'd lost a lot of faith in what we could do. So it wasn't an overly optimistic Main Road as far as the fans were concerned. And it was justified in the end. I mean, the team that night was Healy, Buck, Connor, Towers, Heslop, Jeffries, Somerville, Lee, Bowyer, Young and Johnson again. And after a Healy error, yeah, you can still see this on YouTube. If you go on YouTube, an own goal by Healy from a cross. At the end, I would have been sitting in the Platt Lane end. Obviously, that then gave Chelsea a 2-0 lead on the light, and City never really looked as though we could pull that back. If anything, Chelsea looked more likely to increase that scoreline. We never recovered, and of course would lose the game 1-0 and go out of the European Cup Winners' Cup, defending our title of that at the semi-final stage. Of course, Chelsea would go on to win it as well. Of course, missing from the City bench that night. I mean, I say still off the field we had the problems. Alisson had been banned by the FA, so he wasn't even on the bench. And any hope, any lingering hope, which had probably been dashed anyway, of Joe and Malcolm making up and being friends again, were totally dashed as Alisson to the press, and everyone who would listen clearly laid the blame of this Cup Winners' Cup defeat in the semi-final at the hands of Joe Mercy. He blamed Joe Mercy for risking key players in league games when, all right, the league, there was no chance of us winning the league, and Alisson was thinking that we should be resting players for league games and trying to get them fit for this Cup Winners' Cup, and it just didn't happen. Joe Mercy was trying to play his strongest team, so obviously Alisson made no attempt to hide his sort of anger at what Joe Mercy, as the manager still, of course, had done, and he totally blamed him for us getting knocked out of Europe. So there you go. Any hopes, of course, that this partnership will continue were fading fast, and it only had a few months left to run as far as the partnership at City was concerned. And to frustrate the City faithful was even more frustrating for us in what turned out to be a disappointing season in so many ways. There were the reasons for it, of course, there were with the glut of injuries we had were unprecedented. I think over the last few years of City playing, the pitches may have had something to do with that. The weather had been bad. The pitch, as I said, Main Road had been a bit of an awful pitch to play on most of the time. But City's last game of the season was at Main Road against United, and both clubs were mid-table, literally on the same points, 41 points. And of course, we were rewarded with a 7-goal thriller. But despite Hill, Lee, and Mellor being our goal scorers, unfortunately, we lost 4-3. So we were on the wrong end of a 7-goal thriller, and that meant United finished 8th, which obviously 2 points ahead of City, 2 points for the win. City were in about the middle of the table in 11th of 22 teams, and of course Leeds, who'd led the league for most of the season, actually ended up runners up, a point behind champions Arsenal. So that was quite an interesting one, as I say, because Leeds had led most of that season and looked as though they were going to be winners of it. But there you go. And on a seemingly brighter theme, as we end this look at part 2 of season 70-71, it did look as though the war in the boardroom would come to some sort of end, as a new director had joined who had promised to bring all the warring parties together and bring all brotherhood to the board, etc., etc. And who was this latter-day knight in shining armour? Well, it was a gentleman called Peter Swales. Well, thanks for joining me for this look back at a frustrating season for City, 70-71. Surely with Mr. Swales' influence, the 71-72 season would be an improvement. We'll see, won't we? Anyway, thanks for watching. What we're going to do the rest of the day, have a great one. Look after yourselves, look after your friends, look after your families, money point. Let's all look after each other. So we meet here again on the Citizen channel, or perhaps have a flick across, have a look at my film and TV channel if you get a chance to have a look at that. You want a break from football. I only ask one thing if you guys don't, please stay safe, Blues. Come on, City. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.